started. Great. And liberal use of the chat feature. So if you have any questions while it's going, the presentation is happening, feel free to put something in there, and we will try to field those questions and pass them on. Towards the end, we will have an opportunity, a little bit more open mic, and to be able to have people just converse and go through things. So with that, Lee, I'm going to kick it over to you to do the introductions and get us started.
Well, real good. And it's great. I know there's still a few more people expected, but we want to get started. We have a pretty full agenda. I want to welcome everyone. I'm pleased to see the number of chapters that were able to be on board. We did hear from a couple of chapters that had conflicts this evening, either a regular program scheduled. But I think we have at least 13 or 14 of our chapters represented here. And that's really great to hear and great to see. You know, I did want to indicate, in case you don't know me, I'm the interim president of the, or organizing president of the Pennsylvania Council. We're reestablishing ourselves after really more than a decade of absence as a council. We were the Audubon Council of Pennsylvania until the Pennsylvania office was formed with Cindy Dunn. Cindy Dunn essentially had the whole council board as her board to start out. And over the years, things have changed. And we thought now it was really important for us to reestablish the council for the chapters in Pennsylvania. And the program tonight is going to be particularly helpful because we have representatives from other states, from Ohio, from New York, and from Colorado. Each have chapter councils. We'll hear a bit about how they're organized. This is not a cookie cutter. Every council has its own kind of organization, its own personality, and its own flavor. And we have the benefit of representatives of two of the states who also happen to be members of the National Audubon Society Board. And you know, we will have a chance to hear their perspective as well right after I introduce the panel. We also will have, following the panel discussion and a chance for your questions in chat to be addressed, 3 short presentations from the Renewable Energy Working Group, and then also from Lehigh Valley Audubon Society, talking about the issue of spotted lanternflies. And then also I'll be making a brief presentation about recruiting some support to help us reestablish chapter involvement in identifying the issues of concern to our chapters here in Pennsylvania, and not dissimilar to what we may hear about what some of the other councils do. But we had a system in place years ago. We've recovered some of those archives from Walt Pomeroy, a name some of you may remember, and from Cindy Dunn, who have forwarded their archives to me, and also from Marcy Boyle, who was with us for a number of years. So there are a number of things we'll be able to draw upon from our own history and what we may learn tonight, and what seems to fit with us, you know, in terms of chapter involvement, you know, currently in given things. One thing I did want to point out, I think everyone has heard the news that David Yarnold is departing Audubon. He's going to be leaving in May. Many of you, I think there were multiple contacts yesterday from National Audubon and others about the departure. I did want to indicate that we were not going to address that this evening here with this council meeting. It is an important issue. We'll continue to monitor how that is potentially any kind of shift at the top can sometimes have implications for chapters and councils. We'll monitor that, but we also expect we'll be learning a lot more as the days and weeks proceed in terms of you know, what is involved. I know there was a meeting that was kind of quickly scheduled tonight that's concurrent with ours from Elizabeth Gray, who is the president of Audubon and is now going to be the interim CEO with David's departure. We are hoping to have that recorded so that those of you that are here at this meeting can hear what Elizabeth Gray has to share with chapter leaders across the country. And I understand, and I think Marcy just updated me as well, there are going to be multiple sessions that she may be providing so that we can learn a bit more about the transitions Audubon is going through, and we'll continue to monitor that. But again, that's not going to be part of our discussion this evening. It may be a point for a future discussion. Let me talk a little bit about the panel so we can get started with the program. What I really wanted to do was introduce the current board member and the former board member of the National Board. Sally Jeffords has graciously involved herself again. I think this is our second council meeting. You were involved with us in January, Sally, which we appreciated. Just as a point of information, Sally does have a home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So we're glad that she's a Pennsylvanian in part, if not whole. She's really not. She's all over the place. I think I'm going to mention to you that she is also a Friends of Hog Island board member. I share that board membership with her, and really pleased to be on a board with her. She was my successor and is now the current representative to the Atlantic Flyway North on the National Audubon Board in her second term, and doing a great job representing us there. Bill Heck is with our Ohio Council, but he is, I guess you just completed in February, technically, your role as the Mississippi Flyway North representative for the National Audubon Society. Bill and I overlapped briefly while I still served on the board. I think we actually shared some time in Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, Bill.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did. We had a great birding trip in Columbia, and great time with that. But Bill also designed, and if I'm saying this wrong, Bill, you correct me, you designed the Ohio Council website.
I did, yes.
Which is pretty good. And we'll be able to get Sally and Bill's perspective along with the rest of the panel. But let me introduce the rest of the panel. Jackie Augustine is the president of the Council of Ohio Audubon Chapters. They've been in existence for a number of years. She is now moving on in June when she completes her role as the president of the Ohio Council. She's going to become the executive director of Audubon of Kansas. It's not connected to National Audubon, it's independent. But really wish her well in that role. And I'm sure the folks in Ohio are going to miss her in terms of her presence in Ohio. Also want to introduce Marcy Boyle. Marcy and I go back when I did serve on the National Audubon Board and got to attend a lot of the New York Council meetings. She is on the board of the New York City Audubon. She's on the board of Audubon New York. I guess it's Audubon New York / Connecticut now, perhaps, who knows, right? And she is also past president of the Audubon New York Chapter Council. So the role I knew her best in terms of the council meetings. Also want to mention Peg Rooney. Dr. Rooney up there is on my screen. You're in the upper left, Peg. I don't know where everybody else is in the Brady Bunch screen here, but she is the president of the Audubon Colorado Council. She's the president of the Arkansas Valley Audubon Society, which is the southern part of Colorado, that chapter. And a thing I'd like that you share with me, Peg, that if people talk about having a spark bird, I think most people know what that means. And Peg really got involved with birding 10 years ago. Her spark bird was a golden eagle. I mean, how many people can say that they had a golden eagle as their spark bird? And then finally, I'll introduce Jim Bonner, who needs no introduction, but he's the executive director of the Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania. They have served once again as our host chapter for this council meeting, and he will be the moderator for the panel tonight. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and let Jim and the panel take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Lee. And welcome to Jackie, Peg, and Marcy. Thanks so much for being with us. As I mentioned, I was going to ask you first if you can kind of paint a little bit picture of your council. And Jackie, I'll start with you to let us know, like, how many chapters are there in Ohio? How many are members of the council? How long has the council been around? Just a little bit about the kind of the size and scope of it.
We have about 17 chapters in Ohio, and about 14 or 15 of them are active in the council. We had a little bit of a hiatus, a 10-year hiatus, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, we restarted. And so we continued with the old bylaws. We have a 6-member board with 1 person from different chapters. So not all our chapters are represented on the board, but we do have a very diverse board. But we have monthly membership meetings where all the chapters, a representative from all the chapters get together and we just talk about issues. And then we have a monthly board meeting, which is also open to all membership. And then we have 2 in-person or virtual meetings a year, as the case may be.
Great, thank you. Pei, how about things in Colorado? What's your structure like?
Well, Audubon Colorado Council's been around since the early 70s in some form or another. Back then it was called the Colorado Audubon Council. And several of the chapters at that time, there were some environmental issues going on in Colorado, and they said, how on earth can we get our voices heard at the state legislature? And they contacted the regional Audubon office, which was in Boulder at the time. And they decided that the best way to do that would be to hire a lobbyist. And so the chapters kicked in on some donations, and then Audubon picked up the rest, and they hired a lobbyist. And interestingly enough, to this day, we are still using the same lobbyist family from years ago. And so we have the oldest lobbying relationship, I guess you'd say, in the country. We have 10 chapters in Colorado. We have 1 voting representative from each of those chapters, makes up the council. We meet 4 times a year. And we have an executive committee, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. And we have 3 standing committees, a public policy committee, and they work with the Audubon lobbyist. And they assess the bills that are coming up, and then they prioritize them based on our interest and what's in line with our goals and objectives for the year. We have a conservation committee, and we have a water task force. So in Colorado, we're in a drought, and so water is the new gold for us. So this task force keeps us apprised of water issues. For example, a proposed dam in a wilderness area, that kind of thing. And then we work with Audubon Rockies, a Western River Initiative, to keep an eye on those kinds of crazy things that are happening in our world of water, lost water. Let's see, what else? Do you want to know that we continue to support our lobbyists through donations? Each chapter provides anywhere from $2 to $3 per member per chapter. And we donate that to National Audubon Conservation Programs, which is actually the umbrella for the lobbying effort. We are a nonprofit registered with the Colorado Secretary of State and the IRS, but we are not a 501c3. We chose not to pursue that designation.
What are you designated as?
We are designated as a nonprofit.
Okay, just
So, as a nonprofit, but not a 501c3. We don't do any fundraising. And you were talking about budgets. We have like $1,000. So no, we're not in the business of raising money. And the reason we have that small amount of money, relatively small amount of money, is that each of the chapters kicked in some money, because when we had face-to-face meetings, if the chapter that was hosting it needed a little extra money to put on the event and feed us and that kind of thing, they could actually ask for some money from our small treasury for that purpose.
Great. I'm going to circle back around a little bit later to talk about money a little deeper, and I'm curious to understand the relationship that you said how the money from the chapters flows in and goes to the conservation fund. So
You bet.
don't forget, or let me forget to bring that back up again. But
Sure.
I'd like to ask Marcy to tell me a little bit about the structure of the New York Audubon Council.
The New York Audubon Council, it's been in existence probably 25 years. We have 27 chapters in New York, and we have 25 that are active, with Audubon. And we have 2 meetings a year in person, and they run from Friday night to Sunday afternoon, one in the spring, one in the fall. And we usually get between 21 and 23 chapters in attendance, depending on the geography of where we hold the meeting. We are an independent 501c3, although nobody can find the paperwork for it. We have a board of directors, which consists of 12 people who are elected by the council, by the chapters. And we have bylaws and have president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And basically the way we interact with Audubon New York and the state offices. The council passes a series of resolutions. We have a body of resolutions that have been updated and built upon over the history of the council. And they are recirculated in the summer to all the chapters for additions and changes, whatever might be. And then they are revised again and voted on by the chapters or approved depending on each chapter's own rules about how they deal with this. And then in the fall meeting, they are adopted by the council. And they provide a kind of a policy statement of the chapter's concerns and priorities, which under a new resolution that we have with Audubon New York says the council will provide grassroots input on public policy and programs to Audubon New York through its chapters council resolutions. And that forms kind of, there's not a lot of disagreement, amongst the Audubon family about what are important issues. There's sometimes a different emphasis on what the state office considers to be important versus what some of the chapters might feel is important. But Audubon New York staff, which is the state office staff, has a lobbyist, and that lobbyist, basically handles our relationship with the legislature. And the body of resolutions that we have generally are indicative of where we might support issues that come before the state legislature and the governor's office. And we do a lot of sign-on letters with various other not-for-profits, and all of this is directed and facilitated by Audubon New York's lobbyists. And I think that's about it. Yeah.
Is there a budget for the New York Council?
No, not an Audubon New York budget. We have a small bank account. I think the last time I heard it was about $6,000, and it was just sort of just accumulated and accreted over the years. And basically how that's derived is for our council meetings, we charge a registration fee, which covers the common costs, like the audio visual, the meeting rooms, et cetera. And then we tack on, and so basically that washes out against the expenses. And then we've tacked on a $5 surcharge for each participant to the council, which sort of builds up a speaker's fee for us in case we have to pay for transportation for a speaker, or if somebody wants an honorarium or whatever. And the Audubon New York staff actually does the legwork of negotiating the contracts with the hotels for the meeting rooms and the block of rooms that we would use, and the rate that we're going to get. They do a lot of that for us, and they handle all the distribution of mailings, which are now mostly done by email. And they basically provide the administrative support at no charge. Well, I shouldn't say at no charge. If there's an actual charge, we reimburse them. And when everything was done by snail mail, US mail, there was a little bit more expense. Now the expense is really negligible. But basically the registration fee then covers all of those common fees, that common charges that you get from the hotel for the meeting facilities, other than the rooms, which are paid for by the individual attendees or the chapter, again, depending on how the chapter handles that.
If I'm interpreting this correctly, and for all three of you, it sounds as if New York has a very close working relationship with the state office. Colorado sounds like you do interact with the Rockies office, but it may be not as integrated or frequent or intimate as it is with New York. And Ohio, where do you kind of fit on the spectrum of that?
The Great Lakes office is great at providing resources or getting resources when we need them. Like, for example, one of the chapters wanted some mapping resources to redo the map of their Christmas bird count. And we couldn't, at our monthly meeting, no one really had a good resource. So I went to our liaison with the Great Lakes, and they were able to find us a good resource that we had through National Audubon. And so we have a great information exchange, but not really, I would say, any physical or the Great Lakes office also did coordinate our Zoom meetings. So hosted the Zoom meeting and coordinated registrations. But I think that was an exception. They aren't really involved with when we have in-person meetings.
Mm-hmm. So they don't actually have
in Colorado, though, our regional office is Audubon Rockies, and our Audubon Rockies rep attends every one of our council meetings. She's always there giving policy updates, telling us action alerts that might be needed. So we communicate regularly. She's always providing resources and sending, as I say, action alerts. And we're asking her for advice on local or statewide issues that we have concerns about. So I think we do have a good working relationship with Audubon Rockies.
I think in New York, we have a very close relationship with the staff because we have these two meetings that are, from weekend meetings. And I would say probably about at least 10 of the Audubon New York staff attend each of these meetings. We've really just all gotten to know each other very well over this period of time, which facilitates communication and facilitates individuals, calling up with a question or whatever. And of course, Audubon New York has a chapter engagement staff person, and Laura McCarthy. Some of you may have met her over the years, and she keeps in close touch with the chapters. So I think we have a very close relationship. We the chapters and the chapter leaderships have a very close relationship with the Audubon New York staff. And that's, I think, very important because it communication makes all the difference in the world in terms of not having misunderstandings about issues. And they've been very, very helpful and supportive of the council. And the council is very helpful and supportive, I think, of the staff's, needs, whether when they need support on an issue or when there's, they need information about how chapters are feeling about something or other because they've been asked by National to, give some input. So it's a very, very good relationship with the state office.
Jim, could I bring in a couple notes about some other states that might be useful? I should mention in Ohio, by the way, we're part of the Great Lakes region, so we're covered by the Great Lakes office. However, the Great Lakes office is pretty new as these things go, only a few years old, and has been growing. So really this last year, this year are the first years that the Great Lakes office has had any significant presence in Ohio at all. So I would expect the relationship in Ohio to evolve. And Jackie is absolutely right about where it is now, but I would hope it would evolve a little further. I was also going to mention Wisconsin and Illinois. I can give you a little information about their councils. I don't know any details about structure. However, in Illinois, it's the Audubon Council of Illinois. They primarily are composed of chapters, about a dozen chapters, I believe it is, that are in the northern part of the state. They're very much split. I don't think Pennsylvania have an east-west split of considerable dimensions in some ways. And by the way, I should mention that I have a Pennsylvania heritage. My mother's family is from Pennsylvania, so you're part of my family as far as I'm concerned. But in Illinois, their focus is sort of a hybrid. They do some conservation work. They do a lot of just coordination among the chapters to work on projects. They work very closely with the Great Lakes office, but that stands to reason because the Great Lakes office started as a Chicago office and has expanded outward over the last several years. In Wisconsin, there are, I believe, 18 chapters, They went through a lull a couple of years ago where they weren't doing very much at all. They're starting to revive, as I understand it now. And I haven't been in touch real recently, but they're certainly more active than they were. They're primarily focused, I think, on coordination and helping communication and so on in the chapters. I think less focused on legislation and so on, but they do some in that area, I believe. So just FYI, those are some other councils that are going on.
Great, thank you.
I'd just like to add one thing. The Audubon New York board chooses one person from the council, usually the council president, to sit on the board as well. So that also further knits the organizations together. So there's a really close networking and communication in New York between the councils, the chapters, the staff, and the board, which I think works to the advantage of each one of those entities.
Mm-hmm. Marcy, if I recall correctly, there is either a charter or an agreement or something between the council and the state's office. Is that correct?
Well, it used to be that it was written into the Audubon New York board bylaws that the council, that there would be a council, that they would pass resolutions, and that those would form the basis of Audubon New York's priorities. Under the new guidelines issued by National Audubon last year for state boards, all of that language was no longer permitted. I mean, basically, we had really very little choice in what the Audubon New York board bylaws would say. So as a result of that, the council and the Audubon New York board agreed on a separate memorandum of understanding. And it didn't go quite as smoothly as I just said it, but it did happen, which basically embodies kind of like the framework of the relationship between the two entities. And basically it says that the Audubon New York staff will provide, state office will provide reasonable administrative support to the council, that the council will provide grassroots input on public policy, that Audubon New York will take the council grassroots input into consideration, and that if they disagree, we would attempt to work it out or respectfully disagree, I think are the words that we use. But I don't think we've had a lot of differences of opinion because, again, most of us are all on the same page on issues. But basically, this framework, I think, pulled further away the state office's direct connection to the council's stated positions. And while there may not be a lot of substance in the difference, that pulling away, which was a result of directives of National Audubon, did create some kind of like, I don't want to say bad feeling, but let me say suspicion as to why that was. But in reality, I don't think much has changed. I think it's still a good relationship, and that's because we're so integrated in other ways, you know, in terms of personal connection and the frequency with which we are in each other's company, that you know, things get sorted out. But what National Audubon didn't help. But at the end of the day, we were all collectively able to save it because we all have this good relationship.
Great. Jackie and Peg, do you have any documents or written or unwritten documents, agreements with your respective states or? Okay. I'm going to ask this of all three of you, and it's kind of a little bit of an open-ended question, but since we're still in our formative stages, and we also are in the getting a whole new regional office just being created with a new regional director, any suggestions or recommendations other than to try to get along and make those personal connections? Any other suggestions for us we should be thinking about?
Well, as I expressed, you know, the personal relationship, which comes from being in each other's company frequently, which, you know, involves not just the formal board meetings, but we always have birding and we have dinners and we have a lot of, you know, just generally hanging out. It's like a family reunion twice a year. It's just long enough so that we don't get into arguments, but, you know, short and frequently enough that we're happy to see each other. I think that that's a very strong point, as it is in any kind of complex organization. Personal relationships can smooth over a lot of the things that might otherwise cause misunderstanding. So I would say trying to build a frequent connection between your state office staff and the board, your state board, is important. Now, we have urged, and I think we have a resolution, I don't know how much is being followed at the Audubon New York board, that every board member during the course of their term must attend one council meeting. And I think probably more than half the board has attended a council meeting, and they always come back, I really enthused and refreshed. So we try to keep the people knitted together so that it makes misunderstandings less frequent and more easily resolved when they do occur.
Yeah, I'd say invite your Audubon rep to your meetings, give them time to provide an update and any policy matters that they want to discuss. Set up a listserv so that you're communicating regularly with your council and your Audubon rep. Share resources, ask questions, ask for them to provide you with this. Or if you have an issue, contact your rep right away and say, hey, how can we work together to make this happen? And then just have one point person so that your Audubon rep can contact the president of your council, for example. Just that one point person kind of facilitates communication, I think. Be flexible, be persistent.
Yeah, since we don't have we have a cordial relationship, but not a lot of connections. I think, and given the history in Ohio, I think our board is wants to accept the help, but is kind of leery about, they'll give us help now, will they pull out later and we'll be left stranded? And so that's our concern, but it looks good now and we're optimistic for the future.
So there's some history there that.
Yeah, I'll let Bill, because he was with that history.
The biggest part of the history is we used to have a state office, and it was getting on 11 years ago or something. So people have long memories, but that office sort of went away. And, connected with the news that David Yarnold is going to be leaving, that happened in the previous administration before Yarnold got there. It would not have happened had Yarnold been there. He was not going to let state offices just sort of evaporate.
Yeah.
But the Ohioan did before he got there. And so, yeah, there was some feeling that, well, gee, they all went away and left us high and dry.
Got it.
Let's kind of go, that's maybe talking up or sideways. Let's talk down to the other chapters that are in there. Most of you mentioned how many chapters in your state and mentioned that there were a few that weren't participants. Curious to know, why you think that may be. Is it just their size or their interest, or are they actually against the council or things? Just trying to understand the relationship that happens within the state. And anyone can start on that one.
Well, we have two chapters that don't participate. They're very small geographically in terms of numbers, and I don't think they're very active chapters to begin with. But one of them is very skeptical about the state office, and I don't think it's based on anything. It's just they're not very active chapters to begin with. So why they don't participate is we constantly contact them, both the council leadership and the state office, and I would say one out of every 6 meetings they might show up. But I think the reason we have such good attendance at our council meetings is because they're fun and they're very informative. We have a very active program which includes presentations from national staff, from state staff. We pick a theme, we get speakers, we have interesting speakers. It's a nice weekend of birding, usually at the wrong time of the year to bird, but that's another story. But I think the one problem that we do have, and you probably have it in Pennsylvania as well, is the distance to be traveled between meetings. If you live in Jamestown or the Adirondacks or Long Island, what's central, no matter what central point you pick, you're traveling a long way. So we try to, move every other fall meeting to what we call the remote parts of the state so that people don't have to travel as far. We do also offer some a stipend if chapters feel like they need a little support to send somebody to a council meeting. We have, I think it's $250 that we give out every year, and if people don't claim it, so we have it, we can give it to 2 or 3 people, just to encourage chapters to be there. And if you're in that position, that helps to get people there. Pays for gas, pays for transportation.
Jackie?
Yeah, in Ohio, we have some chapters that don't participate, but again, I think as we have long memories in Ohio, and like we just, like you said, we keep sending them the information, and hopefully one day they'll decide to check us out just to see if anything's changed.
It's the old wound that they never heal.
It must be Irish. We like that.
Peg?
Oh, well, we have 10 chapters and all chapters participate.
Great. Can you speak a little bit more about the funding thing you mentioned in your opening and how that works?
Sure. So all of the chapters agreed that they would contribute anywhere between $2 and $3 per member. And they would make that a donation to Audubon Rockies Conservation Programs, which is the umbrella for the lobbying effort. And then Audubon itself kicks in the remaining part of the salary for the lobbyist.
Is that membership? I don't know how many of your chapters have independent membership, or that's counting national Audubon members.
It's national Audubon members. So, so say Denver has, I don't know, 10,000 members, and they would do, they can afford $3 a person. So they would do that and then make that donation. The small chapter that has, 200 members might choose to just do a $2 per member donation.
Great. Do you suspect that most of them take whatever their baseline payment is and just pass it back?
I suspect that's what that is. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Have any of you had maybe an issue or a topic that you were working on that actually caused division among the chapters? And if so, how did you go about addressing that or resolving it? I don't know if there was an urban versus rural legislative issue or some other type of thing. In Pennsylvania would involve fracking, of course, but just wondered if there was any topic that came up that way. And again, how do you go about resolving that?
And in fact, fracking did create a little division several years ago when that was, still, going strong, and there was an attempt to start expanding fracking in New York. And there were differences of opinion about whether some chapters felt we should absolutely say, a total ban on it and object to any legislation that was currently before the state legislature. Others felt we should put ourselves in a negotiating position to talk about different ways of mitigating both where things would be permitted and what would have to be done. And it caused actually some real disagreement at one council meeting. That's about the only issue where there's been real disagreement. Fortunately, it was resolved by, I guess, natural gas, kind of getting ahead of fracking, so we didn't have to deal with it too directly over time. But I think there's differences of emphasis in certain areas, whether it's, when you talk about renewable energy, what's really renewable, or is solar power really what we want? Depending on whether you're from Long Island, where you have the beaches, or from upstate, where you have, more wind turbine activity, to the central New York chapters, where they're talking more about solar and, sticking them in old farmlands. Everybody has a sensitivity point to those. So I think it really becomes more like healthy discussion, and we come to some resolution as to how we will present ourselves when those issues come before the state legislature or the different agencies. But I don't think we've had real disagreements. There's just a good, healthy debate on most things.
Peg, how about you?
Well, we did a statewide non-lead ammunition campaign, tried to educate big game hunters about the dangers of lead poisoning to raptors and other scavengers. And we produced a non-lead brochure, and we handed out vouchers to licensed big game hunters for a free box of copper rifle bullets. but the western slope of Colorado is pretty conservative, and they don't want no government agency telling them what to do. We're trying to explain we're Audubon, we're not really a government agency, but they were really hesitant about that. You can't tell me that I can't shoot what I want to shoot. But we did persuade, some of our western slope chapters did persuade a few hunters to try some copper bullets, and they were converted and actually are now helping to advocate for the use of copper. But for a while there, our western chapters were saying, we don't think we want to step into this. This is too controversial.
Mhm.
But it had a good outcome.
Great. Jackie?
We aren't as involved in advocacy as some of the other state chapters. I think we're more serve our chapters. But the major point of contention within our council was how we were spending money. For a time, we were hiring someone to help coordinate, and some chapters didn't like how we were spending money, but and so, we talked about it, and we came up with a different funding model so that we weren't spending money as quickly. We now have chapters have an option of whether they want to join at a sustaining level or just at a member level. So sustaining chapters are $300 for the year. A member chapter is just $75 for the year. And then we also do have individual memberships, because not all of our state is covered by a chapter. And some individuals just want to support the council anyway, individually. And so we have an individual membership at $20 per year. So anyway, with that, we're able to fund our website, our taxes, and our 2 in-person gatherings a year. So that's the only controversy or recent controversy we've had.
I did forget to mention that we do have an assessment for each chapter, council dues, but it's not, well, it's not very much. I suppose for some chapters it's a little onerous. I think it's based on I can't actually remember what the formula. There's some kind of a formula. I could send it to you if you find out what it is. I just don't recall it. But it's not a lot of money. Well, I'm on the New York City Audubon board, so we don't think of it as a lot of money. But maybe some of the smaller chapters have difficulty. But it's basically everybody pays it. It's not onerous, and it goes towards basically supporting the charges for the meeting.
Great. I have a couple more levels of interaction I want to try to get to. The next one would be with the public in general. Is there a awareness of the council? Do you ever try to speak to the public directly, or is it always through the chapter? Is there ever any confusion about which Audubon is saying something or talking to them? And maybe I'll start with Jackie on that one.
Yeah, we don't reach out to the public. We reach out and support our chapters.
Okay.
Jim, could I comment? This is Bill. If I could comment that in any case whatsoever in which there are 2 Audubon entities, the public will be confused.
That's true.
That's just the rule.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we just do sign-on letters on various issues that are sort of put together by our engagement Laura McCarthy person, or a lobbyist at the state office, lobbyist Erin McGrath, and they'll send out opportunities for sign-on letters, and most of the chapters will sign on to most things, and that enables them, when they go before the legislature or before various state agencies, to present these sign-on letters. And also our resolutions, basically you can just whip them out and say, look, we're in favor of this, or we're against that, or whatever, and it's all there in a body of printed statements that can be used. But we don't identify it as the council, in terms of an independent entity.
We do. When we want to leverage our voices and make our governor hear us, we'll sign on as Audubon Colorado Council. We did some oil and gas. They wanted to do some oil and gas leasing on greater sage grouse habitat and also lesser prairie chicken habitat. And so the individual chapters put in their 2 cents worth, but then we also put in a comment letter from Audubon Colorado Council.
Great. Do any of you have any either key or recurring or other environmental organizations that you partner with or ally with out there, whether, you know, environmental, legal, any of those types of organizations?
Well, the council, again, we don't tend to act independently because we have this body of resolutions, which is, you know, then, you know, supported and spoken through Audubon New York staff. But the Audubon New York staff representing all the chapters does partner with a lot of the NGOs that are lobbying and advocating in Albany, the Sierra Club, you know, what's the other big one?
Nature
You know,
Conservancy. Mhm.
yes. And there are a whole bunch of them in New York, you know, they're just all over the place. But there's probably a core of maybe 7 or 8 big environmental organizations, and they kind of run around the Capitol in Albany together as a little cabal, you know, divide themselves up and talk to the legislators. But so as an organization of chapters represented by the Audubon, represented in the personage of the Audubon New York lobbyists, we do partner with other environmental groups.
Great. Peg, do you have any people you consider partners?
Colorado allies with Wild Earth Guardians.
Mhm.
And we also work closely with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We actually, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has a round table, and it used to just be inundated with hunters and anglers. And so that's all Parks and Wildlife ever heard from. But we got an Audubon Colorado Council rep on there in the last few years. And so now they can hear a wildlife watcher, birder's observations and perspectives instead of just only from consumptive users.
Great. And Jackie, I know you posted a little thing in the chat there about you basically it's going through Great Lakes.
Yeah, we don't have, we definitely reach out and invite other organizations to come to our gatherings and give presentations. Like we had the chief of the Ohio DNR come in and give a presentation, but we haven't had any formal initiatives yet.
Great. Do you interact at all directly with National Audubon? I know most of you we've talked a lot about going through the state or regional affiliate, but do you find that you have any one-on-one, I mean, other than inviting someone to be a speaker at a conference or something, but in kind of the working of your councils, is there a direct connection to National?
Not really in the sense, because we don't, as a council, other than the resolutions, really engage in activity. But because we've had many speakers from National Audubon at the council meeting, this personal relationship that develops between chapter leaders and council leaders with those people. And you can feel free, you know, we felt free to certainly in the last several years with David Ringer and Sarah Greenberger and others who, you know, who are active in advocacy, or even some of the other programs like, you know, the bird-friendly communities and things like that. I mean, you felt free to pick up the phone and, you know, and call them as individual chapter leaders. And they're familiar with the council and they understand how the council, you know, operates. And, but again, the council itself doesn't see itself as a body to act independently. We see ourselves basically as the makers of this meeting that keeps everybody together and focused. And the resolutions kind of speak for that. I think if there was a departure by the Audubon New York board and the staff from those resolutions, then I think you would have a problem. And, you know, one of the reasons that I made it, you know, clear to the Audubon New York board that it was important to have this memorandum of understanding put in place since this other language was removed, is because you don't want to have all these separate Audubons running around, certainly up in Albany, which is a confusing place to begin with. You want to look like you're speaking with one voice, even if they don't hear disagreement behind it, but you certainly don't want to have, you know, a difference of opinion. I always, you know, tell my board members that we're just a bunch of good-looking people who raise money that really only stand for ourselves, but they all, I think, are proud of and engaged with the idea that we support a grassroots network that expresses themselves through the resolutions, even though they probably couldn't tell you they'd ever read the resolutions. But I think that, again, there's a commonality of thought amongst all of us. It's only where you would have some issue of controversy that might separate you, that would bring up these other issues, or an issue of emphasis. And that's, chapters are free to pursue with the council and with the Audubon New York staff and the board to try to get that emphasis put where they may feel it's not getting its due.
Peg or Jackie, any different relationship?
Well, Bill was a member of Ohio and very involved, and so I think we heard a lot of national.
Yeah,
We
and
have Sally, so.
I
Yeah, I can
did,
ask Sally that as well.
I did
And
visit-
Sally, you forgot to mention, Sally's also on the board of Audubon, New York City Audubon. She's got many, many hats.
as a national board member, I did make it a point to visit the other councils on a fairly regular basis, but really that was more of a say hello, indicate that we're on their side, that sort of thing. The real work was certainly done in all the councils I knew about at the council to state level or council to region level, depending which was applicable.
That's how it is in Colorado.
Okay.
I
Well-
might add that we've invited, and I know some of you, Jim, you've been there. I think Jim has been to one of our council meetings. We often invite the neighboring state, depending on where in New York we're meeting, to attend the council meetings. We've had representatives from Connecticut, Vermont, Pennsylvania, to our council meetings, and we just enjoy that because it's more exchange of ideas and just more people to get to know and to learn from.
Great. And both Bill and Sally, I'm going to put you a little bit on the mark here. Bill, I'm interpreting you saying that you attend these things, you're encouraging them. Can you say that is kind of the view of the national board, that they look to councils to be an important component in the family and want to see them do well, to exist, to again be integrated in with the larger message that Audubon's doing?
Sally might have a different view, but my take was that at the national level, again, as I think Peg mentioned, they knew that the councils existed, but that wasn't really much of a focus, I would say. I think, again, the national people were letting it up to the state and regional offices to carry those relationships. There wasn't a lot of time spent at the national level worrying about what councils were doing as opposed to everybody else.
Sally, anything to
Well,
add?
I always felt, I know I'm still a regional rep, I keep forgetting. Because of, COVID, we don't get together as we used to. But I have always thought that my position as the regional director is to listen to the councils when I do go to those meetings and be able to convey their concerns to the national, and then if I get anything back from national, to convey that back to the councils. But that's how I feel my role is. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think national is appreciate that because, their connection with the chapters is somewhat limited because there are so many of them and it's very hard to be able to cover them all. So hopefully I help to provide some service to the chapters and to the national board in the same way.
And Sally, I feel the same way. I may have made a little bit of a short shrift of my interactions with the councils. That certainly carrying back concerns, but the concerns would be sort of that I heard that I thought was appropriate for me were, I guess I'd say, internal concerns. It wasn't the so-and-so legislature is working on something and I have to go report that somewhere. That was what was going through the state and regional offices. I think the actual day-to-day operational activities. I think when I went to councils, I always tried to report on here's where national is going in very broad brushstrokes. So to keep people informed in that way, if that distinction makes sense.
Yes, I agree.
Well, let me ask the same question of the two of you that I asked earlier. Any suggestions or ideas or things we should be thinking about now, again, in our formative time here on establishing the appropriate or the most functional, successful relationship we can?
Well, I would just say, I don't think, that you need another Audubon voice speaking independently. I think it's more important that you have this communication, that you're speaking to each other, and that, you weave this web tighter between national, the chapters, and the state office. And I think, we've really viewed the council as a way to not only meet each other, but to be educated on issues and to exchange views. And that includes with the staff at both the state and the national level. So I think the communication among these groups is important. Having yet another Audubon group to explain who they are to everybody is not useful. I always say that Audubon's like the Vatican's got so many separate little departments, you don't know what's going on. And I think it's important to the outside world to think of one Audubon. We've all heard that expression, but it only confuses people if there's multiple organizations, running around, particularly when you're doing advocacy, talking to legislators and talking to, state agencies. So I would think that just making it a vibrant organization that provides information and fellowship to the various chapters adds something that's not there now. And I would recommend that you think about that as a direction you might want to go in.
Bill, anything to add on to that one?
No, I can't do any better than that. I think that my point of view would certainly be that Marcella is absolutely correct.
Sally, as someone who's been on every seat on the bus,
The addition is that the way Marcy's presenting it is definitely the way to look at it. But also the most important thing is when you have a community of fellow chapters and chapter leaders and stuff like that, you want to make it fun. You want to make it so that everybody wants to participate and be included. But it's really comes down to fun, because this is like an avocation. It's not, fortunately it's not your job. But no, it probably would be good if it was your job. But I'm just saying, I just think that's just the bottom line is everybody should have fun. And I think people are fun when they're in a group of people that all want to be together and they want to share similar ideas, missions, love of birds. I just think that's an enormous part of it, because that's what has given me the greatest pleasure over the years that I've been involved in Audubon.
I agree.
Well,
I think the group also has to have purpose and focus.
Mhm.
So yeah, those birds are great and we love them, but by God, I don't want national policies that interfere with their habitat, fragment and destroy what I love. So I think having that united higher purpose is also important.
Great. Well, I had said we'd try to keep the panel discussion here to an hour, and we've just kind of coming up on that. So first, I'd like to thank you all, Peg, Marcy, Jackie, and Sally and Bill, for your insights and input to this. I suspect we will be turning to you again in the future as going forward, and I'm sure we will be inviting you to whatever our next meetings are, and hopefully when we have a live one, you'll be able to join us there as well. So thank you. And
thank you, and best of luck to you.
Things, we'll send them your way. But thank you so much. And Lee, I'm going to turn it back over to you because you have a couple of more introductions.
That's great. And, I will say to Peg and Sally and Bill and Jackie, if I hit everybody, that you're welcome to stay for the next several announcements. I don't think we have more than about 15 or 20 minutes left. But but I also invited you that if you felt that you needed to get on to other things, some of you are in different time zones, maybe getting on to dinner, or some other things like that, you're welcome to leave as well. But again, we'll leave it that way. But thank you so much for helping us helping us find our way as we reestablish our council. And, we're working on that. So we will be circling back to all of you again. And I did raise with Marcy whether or not there might be value for reaching out to other councils and to have some kind of council conclave, the presidents of the different councils. I know Peg, you thought
Everybody's
that
just
might
have
be
an
a good
Audubon
idea.
convention. I mean, it's like,
We could, but whether or not there would actually be a breakout specifically for the councils, for council presidents to talk about and share notes about what they do. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. Might be a worthwhile.
Could be, I mean, I don't know how many councils there are. I mean, do you?
There's a few, and
I know
and I don't know
Florida
them
has a
all.
big one. I mean, down here in Florida, because I joined Audubon Florida and I get their information. They have a big, I think twice a year they have a meeting, et cetera. Of course, nobody's doing it now because of COVID, so I haven't been able to go, but they have a big advocacy agenda and I think they meet twice a year. So, would be interested to hear. I think California has one as well. So it would be
California actually has several councils because of the size of the state.
Yeah, they're small compared to
Compared to New York, everything's small.
And then Vermont does too, which I think.
I know, Sally, you've attended the Vermont Council, and the Colorado Council is not formal, but they do meet, and all good stuff. Again, thank you very much. I really
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
I'm going to leave now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you again. What I'd like to do, in no specific order, but I know Karen Campbell with Lehigh Valley Audubon did speak very briefly on the last chapter call that we had with chapter presidents, but she's been working with Lehigh Valley and doing a lot of research with the issue and the challenge of the spotted lantern flies. Not really a fly, but it is a pest that has really become more and more of a presence in Pennsylvania. If it hasn't reached your county yet, it will. And that there are some things that are being done by homeowners and others to deal with them as a pest that have some great concerns with regard to birds and with regard to other bycatch from insects. So Karen, I think you're there. Yes. You may want to share. Did you want to share your screen?
Yes.
Yep. So Jim, we may need to have Karen share her screen. I think she has one document she wants to show us.
I made it 2 pages, but
all right, that's fine. Take it away, Karen.
All right, here we go. All right, is it up?
Yep. Yes.
All right, very good. So when the highly invasive spotted lanternfly was identified here in Pennsylvania back in 2014, in order to try to stop its spread with an expectation that it's going to be a horrible pest for certain agricultural products, particularly grapes and vineyards, which it is, it's pretty bad. But the Department of Agriculture basically put into the hands of the public and land managers all over giant glue traps wrapped around trees, which early on the expectation was that it would be able to eradicate the spotted lanternfly, but we are well past eradication, any potential for it. So in 2020, the use of glue traps is really being proliferated, and our wildlife rehabilitators now are starting to see major numbers of victims of birds, bats, gray squirrels, flying squirrels being brought to their facilities, with a very low percentage of them ever being able to be released back to the wild. They had over 400 individuals this last year, which represents just a small amount of what must absolutely be dying on the traps themselves. And so we have one of the wildlife rehabilitators in our chapter. We are near ground zero, and our members have been dealing with spotted lanternflies since the beginning. So if we don't deal with this, who else is going to? We're past eradication possibilities, but there are some other alternatives out there. that don't require glue. Penn State researchers have even stopped using glue, but they hadn't taken the recommendations for using it off of their websites as they were even stopping using it themselves. They have now agreed that they will stop recommending it, but the danger is already done. Glue traps are in the hands of a bug-fearing public who's very scared of the spotted lanternfly, still thinks they have to kill every single one they see. So this is largely trying to educate the public and trying to take glue traps out of the hands of people by bringing awareness and showing them what happens. Got here basically that the reason why that we have ended up learning that birds are going to glue is because of the large number of native insects that are being trapped. These are indiscriminate traps. Anything that touches the glue is going to stick. So to an extent, the birds are kind of like the canary in the coal mine when it even comes to to insects that are being trapped. So it's a bad situation overall. And I'm just going to go on to one more page, which is basically my ask for how we can all work together. What we're trying to do within our chapter is to understand the background and the story. In fact, we're even writing a scientific paper that we hope will get published. But with that, we're using it to understand the situation and put together materials that we can share with others and our members within our own chapter, our own territory to get the word out, but we can't do the whole state. So essentially, we've got a website where we'll be putting the materials as we get them prepared, putting together flyers where you could put your own logo and contact information. Stephanie has this social media post example here is something that Stephanie has put together, and she's helping out on this project as well. We've got articles or parts of articles that you can take, edit, use as they are to bring awareness to your own organizations. And then we're also looking for your help to share across other partner organizations you may have, be they wildlife centers within your area, maybe, other social media. They don't even have to be nature related. This is, anyone in the public. And then people who might be interested in doing outreach, getting to stores that are selling glue traps and monitoring and looking for it. So I've got lots of details we can share. If people are interested, I can put together a Zoom meeting where we could get into some more of the details, but we could also keep it real simple, by essentially working on and sharing, just being a voice out there, with people that don't have a lot of time to just be able to share the message on social media.
Is that it, Karen? Did you, I knew you're writing a little bit of a write-up that we can put in our follow-up with the notes from this meeting in our next edition of the Drummer that might get out by the end of this week or early next week.
I will, and there's more material already on this website, which if it isn't live, it will be live very soon. So
very, very good.
Yep.
And so you're really requesting other chapters to really connect with you to help spread the word?
Absolutely.
Really good.
And, and the hope, for you folks out west is that we can stop this so that it doesn't become a habit there at all. I kind of think of this, not a whole lot different than the spotted lanternfly. They made an attempt to try to stop it before it moved on. We're going to try to eradicate this process before it comes really more serious. And truth be told, there's glue traps out there to catch mice and fly traps. I was absolutely amazed in working through this process to learn how many birds are caught on those traps already too. Glue's a problem overall. So we're saying for the spotted lanternflies, but if we could stop glue traps for pests altogether, that would be great.
Great. So we'll provide some follow-up, Karen, after this meeting, so folks can be in touch with you as well. And Stephanie with Northeast PA Audubon has been a major collaborator with you.
Yep. And if you've got anybody that would be able to help us put materials together who likes to do the marketing end of stuff, we could use help.
That's great. Thank you. You can unmute if somebody has questions at this point. You can unmute yourself, but I think you'll get enough information in the follow-up. I think Karen wanted to make you aware of this, and then we'll be able to put you in direct contact with Karen and Stephanie. I think that'll work out most efficiently. Sound good, everybody? Good. Then let me turn it over to Laura and to Judy. They have been the head of the Renewable Energy Working Group, representing, I think, 4 or 5 chapters that have had representatives to begin the work on solar and wind energy and other aspects of renewable. I said to them the other day, I guess you've been in place for about 3 years. And frankly, it's only been a little bit longer than a year and a half, just felt like 3. So I know that they wanted to share a bit of an update and then invite other chapters to become involved with the working group. So I don't know if I'm turning it over to Judy or Laura.
Lee, I'll start.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say, Laura?
Okay, I was just going to mention our draft mission statement, just to set the stage.
Okay.
So, yeah, but basically we're focusing on 3 things. We want to provide information to chapters on proper siting criteria for renewable energy projects. We also would like to help chapters and municipalities and developers to avoid, minimize, and effectively mitigate any harmful impacts to birds and the environment. And also we hope that we can help chapters work with municipalities so there can be local ordinances or regulations to protect birds and wildlife habitats. So those are our 3 focal points. And yeah, we just started last April. I think we had our first meeting. So Judy's going to mention now some things that we've been working on since last April.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Now, right now, there is a big solar push going on in Pennsylvania, and you may not see it, but, and this is really only just the beginning. Some of the examples, first of all, Governor Wolf recently made a big announcement. They want to get various solar projects all over the state to supply 50% of the state's electricity. What's going on right now, there's some 350 projects before PJM, the multi-state grid that would approve these projects, and that's separate from approval by the community. They expect that maybe 1/3 of these will get built. One of the things that's going on right now is what you're seeing is universities, companies, certain cities, municipalities that want to supply their electricity by renewable energy. They have goals of, 50 or 100% by 2030 or 2050. So what they're looking at in terms of solar, they're talking about solar farms, and for the most part, these are going into rural areas, farmland, some areas where trees are being cut down, and they're not using what we would recommend. And first of all, this is consistent with Audubon's recommendations, that they look for brownfields, rooftop solar, distributed solar, rooftop buildings, parking lots. All of these places really should be the first go-to for solar, instead of looking at areas such as rural areas, farmland. And the other thing about this is that these projects are going in the rural areas. It's basically an industrialization of some of the rural areas around the state. for the projects. There's also somewhat of a divide between rural areas and cities, because I know some of the rural areas look at this as they're supplying the cities. They're using their land and farmland to supply the cities with electricity. There was just an announcement today yesterday by Hershey Company. They're putting up 2 big solar farms. Actually, they're buying into one in North Carolina, one in Texas, to supply 50% of their electricity by 2030 from solar. In the state legislature, there have been a number of bills introduced last session, and these are slowly becoming introduced this session. The bill for community solar, apparently there's supposedly like $2 billion worth of investment waiting for this bill to pass. And this would be investment in solar projects in Pennsylvania. We don't know, with the makeup of the legislature, we don't know how far any of these bills will go. We've done a couple of things though. First, we've met with State Representative Chris Robb he's from the Philadelphia area, but he introduced the bill last session, and he's going to be introducing again HB 100 about the transition to renewable energy. And one of the things about there's his bill, we had a very good discussion with him. We're going to be following up with his policy person. His bill and the other bills in the state, none of them talk about siting, and siting is what Audubon emphasizes, that these projects be sited properly. In addition to siting, there are other issues such as, do you have pollinator planting or grazing underneath the panels? Both of these would be preferable to just, digging up the whatever's there, the farms, the trees, and putting in dirt and stone. That's the worst as far as runoff goes. And some of these projects are pretty big. I did want to mention one thing, that we did have a meeting with Tom Murphy from Penn State Extension. Penn State has a number of farms, that solar farms, but what they're doing is they're really looking into the use of pollinator plantings. Pollinator plantings is one thing you can do. There's also grazing of sheep grazing under solar panels, but they're really looking into it and trying to develop some type of best practices. They've also been working on a carbon calculator to look at, well, how much, if you chop down trees, how much carbon is being sequestered that you don't have sequestered anymore, how much carbon will be released. And they have an upcoming, their webinars are pretty good. There's one upcoming on the 27th about utility scale solar farming, vegetative use. And we're going to be meeting with people from Penn State again in the near future. And what we're doing in the committee also, we're working on a policy for community solar, utility scale solar. And we're also working on a document for solar resources, best practices for siting solar panels. Also, it's important, as Laura mentioned, with our mission statement, is that we also want to look at the habitat that's being destroyed. Are they siting these in or any type, not just solar, but any type of renewable energy in areas that are important bird habitats, critical areas, migration areas, all of these, we say basically we need renewable energy, but all these other things matter. Okay, Laura?
Thanks, Judy. I'll just mention two specific projects that we've worked on. We actually started out looking at wind energy development. I have a pretty good background on that because I've been involved for a number of years. But we were really concerned when we found out that the icebreaker project was proposed for the Ohio waters and Lake Erie. Even though it was out of state, we learned that this demonstration project would basically set the standards for future wind turbines all through Lake Erie. So we wrote a letter of concern to the Ohio Power Siting Board because they're the ones who approve the projects. And we had 10 chapters from Pennsylvania sign on to that letter. So if you're from one of those chapters, we really appreciate that support. And, you know, we're still concerned about this issue, but at this point, we're waiting to see if the developer can fulfill some of those application requirements. And we're just in a holding pattern right now, but we did express our concerns. And we're also very concerned if Pennsylvania makes any initiatives towards trying to put turbines in Lake Erie. Now, it's a huge migration route for millions of birds and bats, spring and fall. So another project we've worked on was with solar. National Audubon told us that there's a big solar project proposed for Mount Joy Township, and that's in Adams County. And that's in an important bird area for grassland birds. So National set up a meeting so we could talk to the developer and express our concerns. And we also met with Shiloh Felton, who is the Northeast Regional Coordinator for Renewable Energy. So we were able to speak with the developer, express our concerns, learn a lot about the project. It has not been approved by the township. It won't be voted on probably until June, we think. But all the hearings are over, so it's a matter now of what the township supervisors decide. So after meeting with the developer and with National, we were able to provide some input to Shiloh Felton. She wrote a letter to the developer specifying our concern about grassland bird impacts, asking for pre-construction studies and pollinator plots. So we learned a lot in the process, and we also had input with National. So we feel pretty good about that. And then we also worked with South Mountain Audubon Society. That's the chapter area that covers Mount Joy Township. And the chapter could not write a letter of concern, but they had some residents who live in Mount Joy Township. So we helped the chapter and the residents write a letter of concern asking for pre-construction studies, pollinator plots. And those residents submitted the letter to the township during the hearing process. So we don't know if the township supervisors will take that into account, but at least we are able to express our concerns in a formal hearing. And Judy mentioned pollinator plantings. We're just getting started with research on that. And we found out that Florida Audubon has had a really successful partnership with developers in Florida and solar plantings with pollinator plants. So we're working on that some more. And we're just a small group, like Lee mentioned. So it would be great to have some other chapters involved. Right now we have 5 representative chapters, and we're meeting pretty regularly. We're doing a lot of learning and actions, and it would be helpful if we could spread the workload out with some other chapters. So if anybody's interested, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and just shoot me an email and let me know if you might be interested. No obligation, but you're welcome to attend our next meeting. It's on May the 10th. And if I remember correctly, I think it's at 6 o'clock. And Kelly McGinley, I think most of you know her, has been really great, very active in our group. So has Val Peckham. So we're not operating in a vacuum. We're operating with the help of Audubon Mid-Atlantic, with National Audubon. We just need more chapter involvement. So if you're at all interested and you'd like to get involved, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the details, and I'll ask Kelly to send you the Zoom link as well. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I was just going to, oh, somebody had a question?
I want to make another comment. Something I forgot to mention is that, you know, most municipalities, some don't even have zoning ordinances, but most really don't have ordinances in place to deal with solar power. And there's issues of fencing, you know, animals being fenced in, animal migration routes, as well as plantings. But the one thing I want to mention is that you don't know these are coming. Well, what the solar companies do first is they get all the leases of the property owners, and neighboring property owners don't even know about this. And then once they get all the leases together, then they'll make an announcement and go before the local planning board, or, you know, whatever body there is. But that's the way things work, unfortunately, that, you know, and they're out there doing this now, getting leases in place. So if this is your community, you won't find out about it until it's, you know, it's almost basically like a done deal. That's all.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, you know, this becomes, I think the Renewable Energy Working Group may become a good model for the council and for the work together with National Audubon and with Audubon Mid-Atlantic. You know, as Laura indicated, we've had great support from Val Peckham and Kelly McGinley. I think the new Mid-Atlantic Executive Director signed on to one of the letters that went to Next Era, the developer at the Brookhaven project with South, you know, in the South Mountains chapter territory. So there's a lot kind of integrated here, but we know we're on the threshold. We want to support renewable energy. We know we have to get off the carbon diet for, you know, climate and birds. You know, it's critical, but to do it in a way that's, you know, the siting and it's bird friendly. So we also know we're on the threshold of projects across the state, and hopefully be able to have this group and with Audubon do a deeper dive into how to prepare your chapter to take the steps, use the resources that are being developed to help guide you as, you know, as a home rule state to deal with any large projects that are going to be in your chapter territories or in your regions, and you know, hopefully follow up with that. So, you know, look for more. I think we'll have a little bit of information, Laura and Judy, in our follow-up notes from this meeting, and you know, that we'll put out, and we'll include the link to Laura as well. But working groups are going to be a good way for us to proceed with the issues that we think are important for our chapters to, you know, across the state. It's not a bad way for us to include the chapter voice, and then really be able to get information out and an endorsement from all the chapters for the direction that we are going in. And again, hopefully in concert and coordination with the Audubon Mid-Atlantic and National Audubon as well. One final thing in that regard is I mentioned toward the front end that after we've heard from these other councils this evening, there are some different ways to go about having the chapters identify what's most important to us as the Audubon family, as Audubon chapters. You know, what things do we need to be involved with primarily, and you know, taking the lead? What are some things we need to support but not necessarily lead? Or what are some issues that you know, may be important but they're for other organizations you know, to deal with? That's some of the kinds of things the former Audubon Council of Pennsylvania used to do with surveys. I am looking for a few folks, and again, I'll put this in the follow-up notes, that may be interested in helping to design a process. We can certainly take a look at what New York does. There are other states that come up with ways that they identify the conservation priorities and positions, and that the chapters endorse. And again, in coordination and conjunction with Audubon. You know, New York is just one model, but it's a good one. So we would like to look for some support to develop something to propose to the entire council that we can begin that process. So I'll be reaching out, looking for a few folks that might be interested in seeing what we used to do, not because we want to replicate what we used to do, but it becomes a model of what had been done in the past between the council and the chapters and National Audubon. So with that really concludes the business for this council meeting. I really appreciate that so many of you have hung in for an hour and a half. Appreciate Jim being such a good moderator, and appreciate Karen and Laura and Judy as well in terms of their help. I don't know if there's any parting words from anyone other than to have a good evening. Are we
I would
good?
like to say one thing, Lee, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
It really struck me when we heard Audubon New York speak about their close relationship with the New York staff. And, other than Kelly and Val and Jeannie Ortez, I don't really know who our Audubon staff are in Pennsylvania or the Mid-Atlantic. So it might be educational and very important for us to find out who our staff people are, other than those three that I mentioned.
I think that's pretty important. I will tell you, because of my years with going to all the New York Council meetings, the ones that they had mentioned, Erin, who is their policy person, and her predecessors, the staff does change, and Laura McCarthy, who is essentially Kelly McGinley's counterpart, has been there for well over almost 20 years. So they have that kind of consistency as well. But they're the ones they're primarily involved with, but all their staff come to the council meetings. And that's really important too. And I think that's something, Laura, to work on. And that may be something I'll certainly want to explore with the board and accept any input from other chapters, but we may want to have a gathering, if you will, with Suzanne Bymiller and the staff as it gets, as things cook down and roles are being reassigned as we speak, I suspect. And I don't know what the final disposition or assignment of staff will be. I was on the Audubon Pennsylvania board. I do not think I'll be on the Audubon Mid-Atlantic board. So we'll need to see what we can do to create some kind of liaison. And I would hope that Kelly would be our primary contact, but we'll need that endorsement from Suzanne. But I think that's a great point. It'd be nice for us to get to know folks. Any other comments or questions? Are we all good? Thanks again for a great evening, folks. I hope this was as worthwhile as I felt it was. If you feel it was as good as it was to me, then it's a success. And thanks for representing your chapters.
Thank you, Lee. It was a great meeting.
All right.
Thanks,
for
Lee.
setting it up, Lee.
Yep. Thanks.